Some of you may know me from past ClueCons, maybe some other events, and I think I go back with ClueCon to the original, so 15 years, give or take, at this point. And this is going to be a little different from some of the things that I've talked about in the past. A couple of years ago, I had a realization that I'd probably taken in a lifetime's worth of SIP traces, interop bugs, all stuff that we've been hearing about over all these years. And if I had to fire up Wireshark one more time, I was probably just going to completely lose it. So I started to kind of look around at some other things, and this was really the genesis for what I'm now calling Tovera. So the real sort of light bulb moment was, not sure if anybody really covered this somewhat obscure, interesting story in the news, but in March of this year, a mother in her mid-50s was arrested by the local police because she had gotten very, very involved in her 16-year-old daughter's high school cheerleading career. And she decided to take out some of her daughter's rivals on this cheerleading squad and generated deepfake videos of these 16-year-old girls, doing all kinds of illegal, shady things, whatever else, in the hopes that this would discredit them or whatever, and they'd get booted off of the cheerleading squad and open a spot up for her daughter. So as crazy and ridiculous as this story is, I kind of had this realization in that, a lot of technology people, whatever else, we've been watching machine learning algorithms advance and just sort of the increasing sophistication and realism in modern deepfakes for probably 2 or 3 years now. It was kind of when they've really started getting good. And I saw this story, and not to be ageist, but this lady is 55. My mother is 70, and I'm kind of looking at this and I'm thinking, wow, we're now at the point where that generation is aware of deepfakes and somehow has access to the tools to produce them. This is not some computer science PhD working at Facebook during the day with access to millions of dollars of NVIDIA hardware that's just able to do this. This is now kind of democratizing, for lack of a better word, and becoming increasingly available to everybody for anything from the the purposes of entertainment. There's some great stuff out there, famously with Tom Cruise and some other things, but also to do very, very, very real harm. And in this quote, you see kind of towards the end here, she was basically even encouraging one of these teenage girls to kill themselves because of the fallout from these fake videos that she had generated. So I thought, this is really going to become an increasingly significant and kind of emerging issue as this technology becomes more widely accessible. And digging into it a little bit, I tend to get pretty obsessive about things, and started doing a lot of research on the machine learning generation models, and the kind of current technology-based approach or industry approach to addressing this issue is essentially fighting fire with fire. And with each new release or paper that's published describing a new deepfake machine learning-based generation model, within 2 weeks or a month or whatever, there's inevitably a follow-up paper or a release of a machine learning-based detection model. And here we go. It's cat, mouse, arms race, just tit for tat, back and forth. And digging into some of the research, from Google, Facebook, Microsoft Research, a few others, without even really addressing or getting into any of the probability issues that come back from these detection models, there's widespread recognition that on a long enough timeline, the generation models will win the arms race and the war. And we will get to a point where, unless something happens directly in front of your face through your own eyes, there will be ready available access to technology that can generate absolutely perfect, indistinguishable deepfakes with synchronized audio, whatever else, of anyone doing anything And that's my contention, and that seems to be backed up and supported by a lot of academics and computer scientists in the field. So in looking at this, I began to think, well, what if we approached this issue from the other side of the coin? And maybe what we need to do is not necessarily attempt to detect what is fake, but try to authenticate what is real. And this, this all really sort of started in mid-March, so this is all very early, bear with me. But beginning, essentially in April, I started looking at what, at least in my view, would be a good approach to authenticating digital media as it's released to the world. So because this is ClueCon, we're gonna, we can really kind of get in the weeds here. So essentially, this is an image of me as a Simpsons character. So this is clearly not real either, but this is just a fun representation that happens to sort of match the color scheme of Tovera pretty well. And this is my image. Certainly could be anything, right? And for whatever reasons, I want to provide this to the world for consumption or viewing for whatever intended purpose. So with the various Tovera implementations that I'll get into later, I essentially can take this digital file and present it to the platform. The first thing that happens when the asset add process starts is we reach out to the API and we generate a unique ID. Because there's this issue where if you're attempting to do authentication, the association with the asset and any modification of the asset introduces an interesting kind of chicken or egg problem. So we need to generate this UUID-based, completely random, non-identifying identifier, non-personally identifying identifier, and embed it in the image. So with a open Adobe XMP standard, just like EXIF or IPTC or any of these, just well understood metadata standards, we then use it's XML based, unfortunately, but we use a custom Tovera namespace within the XML, add that unique ID, and embed it in the image itself. We then generate just a good old standard SHA-256 checksum of the entire asset with that unique ID embedded in it. And this is just an example of a SHA-256 checksum that we've all seen before. So we then go back to the API and we say, hey, I'm adding this new asset, and here is the ID that this asset has embedded in it. Here's the checksum that's being presented to the platform to add in terms of verification, and some other interesting things. So in architecting this, I essentially realized, well, much like a telephone, actually, the old story of Alexander Graham Bell invents the telephone, but he realizes he needs another one to be able to call Mr. Watson downstairs. So the authentication implementation does nothing, of course, if you don't have something on the consumption side to verify it. So when a Tovera asset is viewed, the various client implementations reach out to our API and retrieve the checksum. And I thought, well, while we're doing that, why don't we enable all kinds of interesting sort of creator tools and capabilities for things like digital watermarking, linking to social media profiles, potential avenues of monetization. I mean, really, any data that can be represented in the API, the possibilities there are essentially endless. So this is just an example of a JSON object that comes back from the API with some of the records and the additional kind of metadata formats and standards that we support. We then, of course, have to do something with the asset itself. So currently, because I'm cheap and this is a self-funded startup, we're just doing a direct HTTPS put with a shared access signature to our bucket to host it. And now it's there and it's available online. So this is a screenshot from the Tovera dashboard user interface, where now that the asset has been added, the user has the ability to directly single-click, share, and post it to a number of supported social media networks. In the near future here, looking at integrations with NFT marketplaces and a variety of other means of consumption. But this is, again, we're essentially 6 months into this, so this is a good start. And for more sophisticated users, you'll also note that there's generated HTML code for an iframe embed for, somebody that has the necessary skills and access to be able to, directly embed this shared resource within some site somewhere. Here are examples of the Tovera authenticated media asset being added to Facebook and Twitter. There's a pretty, at least what I think, is a kind of a neat architecture here where we essentially have a Cloudflare worker that receives the request at share.tovera.com, and the URL structure contains that embedded identifier, and it generates a Next.js-based series of components that present an overlay on top of the image. So this way, the user viewing the asset doesn't need to install anything. They don't need to do anything. You click on this, and opens in your browser or a window or wherever, and they have access to the Tovera verification data and that kind of whole interface. And this is exactly what that looks like. So you get the kind of a little Tovera tooltip icon in the upper right-hand corner. You can click it. And if the media has not been modified and the checksums compare and match between what the user is actually seeing in their browser, we use the Web Crypto API for that, for access to the SHA-256 checksum implementation, to be able to support any modern decent browser in that.
Dead batteries? Here.
I think I may have gotten a little more life out of it with the old reboot. So we'll see. Sure.
All right, guys, get ready. Dad jokes part 2. Did y'all hear about the roommates that share an Amazon Prime account? They were primates.
All right. This kind of stuff is what makes this fun. So anyway, the Tovera tooltip drops down, and as long as the checksums compare, the rest of the dynamic metadata that's returned from the API, including provenance information like, this is actually produced by me. So not only do we know that it hasn't been modified by any other party or whatever else, there's direct attribution and provenance tracking that goes back to me or Kim Kardashian or whoever, has uploaded this. And because this is all dynamically rendered in real time, kind of going back to that second light bulb moment here, the content creator, regardless of where this has been shared, reshared, or embedded in any number of sites anywhere, or who knows, whatever, can come back to the Tovera dashboard and update any of these fields, other than the verification record, of course, can update any of these fields for whatever they want to call themselves, or a new project that they're hyping, or some drop that's coming, or whatever else they want. And that's something that is done in our dashboard and is reflected dynamically and in real time the next time that media asset is consumed anywhere, any screen, any device, any social media network, wherever. So what actually happens on the client side, on the viewer side? when this verification needs to happen. This is an example of the call to the Cloudflare worker that I described before. It's extremely simple, essentially not really intended for public consumption just yet. I was really kind of laughing at Tony's talk this morning about trying to support developers and get APIs right. I'm essentially at a point where, yeah, I have no chance of in this first pass getting that to happen, and we'll certainly be introducing some API versioning and those kinds of things when some of the SDKs and such are available. So very, very, very simple API call here. So with an HTTPS GET, we call it with the URL parameter of the unique ID, and we get this JSON object back that's, again, dynamically generated and updated and reflected in real time. Then we go through this. The browser generates the SHA-256 checksum of the web, using the Web Crypto API, compares it to what's there, and what comes back from the API. And then if they match, we display all of the rest of the user's dynamic metadata and assets. So of course, what happens if they don't match, or what if we're expecting that unique ID to be embedded in the image and it's not there? So a lot of, like Instagram and everybody else, they famously strip out all of the metadata embedded in images because you don't want to leak people's GPS coordinates or their device types or whatever else. So that's a challenge and something that we're looking to address. But either way, the various client implementations present a series of kind of escalating, scary warnings, not unlike what we've seen kind of evolve over the years with what happens in a browser when something in X509 or the HTTPS CA chain or whatever else fails, or if it's self-site insert or whatever. You just present the user something very scary so that they know, okay, like there's some shenanigans going on with this. So that's what happens when either the expected metadata isn't there or the checksums don't match. So speaking of these current verification consumption implementations, there's the share.tovera.com that I've now referenced a couple of times. Just kind of works everywhere, all these different social media networks. Anywhere a HTTP, HTTPS link can be shared. There's the iframe embed that we kind of saw some example code for in the sharing interface, a Chrome browser extension, so that basically, once the extension is installed, any number of images on a variety of different sites can, be essentially have the embedded metadata automatically detected, extracted, et cetera, so that basically the rest of the stuff can just run, essentially transparently to the user. Then there's also a JavaScript library, kind of a CDN.js hosted JavaScript library that people with access, again, with the necessary skills and sophistication, people with access to the underlying content management system or the publishing platform, whatever it is, for a given site, can do a single include for the JavaScript library and have it automatically run on any assets that they have on any of their pages. So that has the added benefit of not kind of having to do this somewhat goofy, admittedly, kind of share.tovera.com process. And it runs no matter what, any browser. The user doesn't need to do anything, know anything, have any extensions installed. It just works anywhere within content on that site. And then, of course, an iOS application, which is essentially a more mobile optimized, usable version of the Tovera dashboard. And of course, we also have manual verification for auditing and review by security researchers, whoever else, because I recognize very early on in this process, many of you know me, and you have known me for 10, 15 years or whatever, but like, why would you trust me for this? I mean, everything from, somebody could pay me to go in the back end of this and do who knows what, or, some government agency or something could, threaten to send me to Guantanamo Bay or something, who knows, to get me to modify users' records. So there's actually a additional optional step where the verification record and the association with the unique ID, the checksum, all that stuff gets added, just the JSON object essentially gets added to IPFS, and then more or less a kind of standard ERC 721 NFT contract gets executed that goes on any Ethereum EVM compatible blockchain, and produces a completely independent, immutable, verifiable copy of the record that we host, so that, hey, nobody can change that. I can't change that. Nobody can do anything about it. Anybody really has the ability to, independently verify what comes back from our platform hasn't been modified by us or anybody else. So kind of what's next? What's coming in all of this? Of course, the end goal here is, well, this is just implemented in iOS, and anything that you capture with the camera or any other sort of input device, it just, gets associated with your Apple ID, or you have, some integration there or whatever, and it just runs everywhere on anything, on, anytime it's viewed, anytime it's consumed, anything that's produced, whatever else. But until that happens, looking to partner with media applications, social media networks, so on and so forth, with a easily consumable, iOS native, Android, etc., iOS toolkit for embedding both the content creation as well as the content consumption aspects of the Tovera system. Then, because what you'll notice in this is I'm not necessarily saying that this content actually represents reality. What I'm saying is this content is what this person intended to distribute. There's a couple of very important differences there. And I recognize, everything from a Pulitzer Prize winning Associated Press photograph of some, action in Syria, or again, pick on Kim Kardashian, anything that ends up, in a publication or on social media is probably getting touched by something. Even if it's like cropping or white balance adjustment, all the way to extremely heavy, Photoshop, Facetune, who knows what. And I'm not making a position or a stance on any of that. What I'm saying is, at least this photograph that captures this moment that's seen by the Associated Press, it's from the Associated Press, and it's what they intend to present. I'm not getting into the truth game of fake news and whatever else. That's not the concern here. The concern is, hey, is this what the Associated Press actually intended for the world to see? And has it been modified by anybody else? Likewise for Kim Kardashian or anyone. So as part of that, to sort of improve on the workflow, the obvious sort of addressing of that workflow and all of this editing that happens is application and content management and content editing platform integration. So essentially Adobe Creative Suite or DaVinci Resolve or a Final Cut or whatever plugin, whereby once the user authenticates themselves once, they get set up with this platform, anything that they export from any of those software suites is just automatically Tovera signed and verified. And they don't have to do anything else. They don't have to mess with anything. There are no additional steps. And of course, there's tremendous advantages for that across the board. And then, of course, additional file types. So XMP is a little goofy. Again, I don't love the XML. It's got some interesting issues with different file types or whatever else. So there's a variety of, let's just say, different or unique unique ID embedding technologies that we're currently investigating. And the other, cool thing, and of course this really sort of came to the news recently with, with Apple's decision to do CSAM detection with their neural hash implementation. We're not really doing anything like that, but what we're looking at doing is essentially doing neural hash or, perceptual image in some sort of implementation whereby, in addition to the SHA-256 checksum that gets added, of course, the intended purpose for a SHA-256 checksum is that if as much as one bit in that thing gets modified, the checksum doesn't match. But what happens when maybe somebody wants to do a valid, derivative work or some edit or whatever else? Whether they should or not is kind of another question, and that comes down to a variety of interesting use license and copyright issues and whatever else. But we want to essentially give the original content creator the ability to know when this might be happening. And we want somebody that's potentially committed some kind of licensing violation or maybe is up to some kind of, some nefarious purpose or whatever to even so far as to be potentially prevented from uploading some sort of derivative work of content that's already on the platform, or at least be given a, hey, this is remarkably similar to this other image from so-and-so, and, we just want to let you know that we're going to let them, we're going to notify them that you're trying to add this content to the platform, and they may potentially take action, or maybe we will, or whatever else. That's kind of a whole nother can of worms that, frankly, I'm not looking forward to dealing with, but we're probably going to get there. And then, of course, video, right? This all started with this lady making these cheerleader deepfake videos. We've been talking about still images this entire time. As many of you know better than most, video presents all kinds of additional challenges with, like what codec, what frame rate, how do we deal with, verification of media that's not necessarily consumed in one shot. It's often streamed. Nobody's downloading the entire video to give us the opportunity to compare checksums of the entire thing. So there's some more kind of interesting things that we're going to be working on there that hopefully I'll be invited back and we can potentially talk about on this stage in the future. So that's it. That's what I have for you. Have no idea what time I started or how much time I have left, but I'd certainly be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have. Yeah. That one. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, you go ahead and stand up at the microphone. That way we can have everybody that's here virtually hear the questions as well.
Is that a Framework laptop?
It sure is.
Nice.
Yeah. It's about a week old. Yeah. We can, if you'd like, you can find me in the back, and you can get as hands-on with it as you want.
Tell me about the implications for anonymous reporting of war crimes.
Ooh, that's a good one. So, believe it or not, I'm not the only crazy guy that came up with this idea. There are things like so there's a San Diego-based company called TruePic that works in conjunction with Qualcomm to go kind of down into the chipset and have implementations to get sort of more into is this actually what hit the sensor? Is this real? And there's another sort of broad consortium called the Content Authenticity Initiative, if you want to look into that. And at least to me, there are some serious issues with their implementation, specifically relating to that. So they're using certificate-based approaches where once the media is released, it's directly attributable to the individual. And once that content's released, there's nothing they can ever do about that. So to your point in that specific issue, or hey, give it in a given country, the political tides have changed, or who knows what's happened, and now somebody's on the wrong list, and they've got all this content out there, and are potentially in fear for their lives or whatever. So Tovera has the ability. So as far as the image itself, right? There's a unique ID in there. It's UUID. It's got nothing to do with anything. And then what gets stored in either blockchain or comes back from the API, the user has the ability to, again, dynamically in real time, update the record and mark it as private or hiding the additional metadata or visibility. So now the next time that image is consumed or viewed, the only thing that comes back from the API is the checksum. None of the, like authorship information or identifying information or whatever else comes back from the API. And that way, at any point in time, again, if what you're specifically addressing here comes up, any user can basically remove any of the provenance tracking functionality.
Hello? I don't look forward to your problems keeping state actors out of your database, but that's an excellent
Yeah,
answer.
right. Like, well, I'm definitely going to be a target for some state-sponsored agencies. That's going to get interesting.
All right. Do we have any questions virtually?
What overlaps and distinctions do you see with the NFTs and self-sovereign identity protocols?
Overlaps between NFTs and self-sovereign identity.
Just come on up.
So DK would like to know, what overlaps distinctions do you see with this and NFTs and self-sovereign identity protocols?
Okay, so there's actually a completely different version of this presentation that addresses NFTs and a variety of things in that space. This is media content, this is creator monetization, creator control, it's 2021. Of course, NFTs are a very relevant aspect of this. We've already got some blockchain stuff going on. So whether it's OpenSea, there's been other announcements from Twitter or whatever else, allowing content creators to essentially associate their wallet addresses and given things on a marketplace with their social media handles and kind of try to do some variant of this. But currently, again, I believe that there are some serious fundamental issues with how some of these guys are going about these implementations. One of which is anyone at the end of the day, right? Like, but by the you peel away all of the hype and all of the other stuff or whatever else, it's like Bored Ape Yacht Club is a JPEG somewhere, right? When it really comes down to it. So what's to prevent somebody from like, oh, here's the new Bored Ape Yacht Club drop with 10,000 JPEGs in it, and I'm just going to go like write a curl script to go grab all of those things, and I'm going to upload them to a completely different marketplace and call myself Bored Ape Yacht Club, and potentially defraud less than extremely sophisticated collectors and investors, whatever you want to call them, out of potentially millions of dollars or who knows what. So it's another one of these. It's it's my contention. This is very early, but it's my belief that within the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever else, there will probably be like substantial court litigation, all kinds of cases, like not unlike what you would find out or what you would see, excuse me, with. Oh, yep, I bought this Jackson Pollock at a Sotheby's auction for $16 million, and it turns out that, some guy painted it in his garage 2 weeks ago. We see those, right? And like that, there's nothing that tells me about human behavior that like that's the exact same thing isn't gonna, happen all over again, just because there happens to be sort of a NFT or blockchain based, system that's extremely tied to not only a given blockchain, but a given marketplace. So I think Tovera is potentially very well positioned to essentially be kind of like the, underwriter laboratory, good housekeeping seal of approval, whatever, for all media content authentication and provenance tracking across everything, which is a double-edged sword. It's a very good problem to have, but it's also kind of terrifying because there's so many potential applications, and we've got to kind of pick something and focus on something. So, yeah, hopefully somewhere in that rambling answer, I addressed that. Sure.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Kristian.